Hey Glenn, I'm gonna start the buyer agency class. I'm just letting you know. Okay. Nice ways. All right. Welcome to Earn to Learn Hour. So every week on Wednesday, I will have a topic about more contract related things than anything else. And this week we are going to do it about buyer agency. So in real estate, our buyers are either our clients or our customers. So I remember when I started in real estate, there was a great big parking cement, okay, parking cement, and it said customer client. And I thought that's strange. Why did it say customer or client / client? Why couldn't it just say for customer parking only? And then I guess that really was a visual for me, the difference between customer and client. So customer is someone that you are not working in their best financial interest, okay? And a client is someone that you're working in their fiduciary, their best financial interest. So with a customer, it could be anybody off the street, as long as you disclose to them your broker duties to them, your agent duties to them, then they were a customer. The client is someone that we actually have a buyer agency with, and basically the buyer agency is much like an employment contract. So when do you want to use a buyer agency? When do you absolutely have to use a buyer agency is a very good first question. First of all, if you are buying your own property, you do not need to use a buyer agency, because when you're purchasing your own property, you are the principal, okay? But let's say your sister, brother, mother, close family member, cousin, uncle, step all of those type of things, you should really use a buyer agency. In fact, they require it for familia status, okay? So if they're part of your family, you are supposed to. And I don't know how far it goes out, but I do know that it goes out quite a way for disclosure when we're working with a family member, okay? So I would think that it would go out the same length with a buyer agency. So that means that if you're working with your Aunt Karen, you will need to sign a buyer agency with her because they already feel like since they're family, you are going to be working in their best interest at all times anyway. So another thing to disclose is as soon as you are working with someone with a buyer agency, when you speak to the other agent, you always want to let them know that you are a buyer's agent. Now, you don't have to say, hey, Sally, I showed your house on Pasha Avenue the other night, and I just wanted to let you know that I have a buyer agency with those people. You don't have to do it like that. A lot of times when you call to make the appointment or you do it online, it will ask if you are working for a client or a customer, if you're a buyer's agent, if you're a seller's agent, if you're a pre-agency, or however it is. So you already can establish it there. Some companies don't ask that, and that's fine too. But when you call Sally listing agent and you say, hey, Sally, I wanted to know a little bit more about that property for my client. All right. So for us, we are not uneducated people. We are not the consumer. We know the difference between a client and customer. And one is that you have, client is that you have an agreement with. And the way that I always remember it too, the word client has the word lean in it. And so the client is the one leaning into you, right? Because they have an agreement with you. So that person is your client. So I always use the word client and not customer when I'm speaking to the other agent when I have a buyer agency with the buyer. So you don't have to like outright say it, but they should be able to tell by the language you use, whether you're using client or customer. All right, so when to use the buyer agency. So I like to use the buyer agency. Number one, not everybody gets to have a buyer agency with me. And here is why. Because some people you do not want to be tied to. Sometimes you might want to lose their number, okay? Just because you have a client or customer, just because you have a hot body that wants to buy a property, that does not mean that you want to represent them, okay? So if I am just meeting people off of a lead generating sorts, I was going to say meet them off the internet, but basically, yes, when I am just meeting somebody like that, I haven't decided if I want to represent them or not. Sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for. If you are going to be representing them, you are going to be representing their beliefs, the things that they're asking for you from you. And I might not have said this before, but in the last 6 months, we have had 2 buyer agencies where the people just they expected way more than the contract even said. Now I've had this happen in the past for myself, but I've never have happened with the broker, being the broker. And both of these people, I could see the red flags coming. So if you go into a house and you're working with, and you start looking at a house with someone and they can't answer some of the questions or they answer them incorrectly, like, are you pre-approved? Where are you pre-approved? Do you know what type of mortgage you're pre-approved for? What are you putting down? What's your interest rate? If they don't know that, or they're, you definitely get them to a lender. But if they say, I've been to a lender, I don't know these things, I don't need any help, that's a red flag to me. And then I'm not probably going to offer them the buyer agency yet. I also don't want to write a buyer agency with someone that I don't know is pre-qualified. So I would rather write the offer, okay, or pre-approved. Here's a perfect example. I got a Zillow lead. Glenn worked with them. I worked with them. And then we started looking at a few more houses and they wanted to write. And they had said that they were pre-approved or pre-qualified. They said pre-approved, and then they gave me their pre-qualification paperwork, and it was pre-qualification, not pre-approved. And they really couldn't get a lot of help from their lender. I never signed a buyer agency because I was still like wondering if they could get pre-approved. And so it ended up that they absolutely could get pre-approved, but I ended up doing the contract without the buyer agency, just because the way that it went down. So those are some times when you would use it or not use it. If you are feeling out a customer, don't make them into a client yet. What it's not used for, I'm going to go through the buyer agency, but I have some notes down here first. What is it not used for? Please do not use this contract to tie yourself to someone who doesn't want to be tied to you. That's not what it's for. Remember that if they go off and buy something without this, we have to sue them to get the money for it. And not every single one will it be like that. So don't tie somebody to it. I like to use the buyer agency because I get to be completely blunt and tell them what I think, how they should do it, and then they can decide what they want to do. For me, having a customer is actually dangerous because I'm probably going to tell them what to do, and I have to hold back on that, okay? There's two ways that the buyer agency can be used. One is for one single property, and then it is completed upon the sale of the property, right? Once they buy a property, then the buyer agency is completed. The second one would be continuously. So if somebody was continuously looking for some land or a foreclosure or a flip house or apartment buildings, they were continuously working with you, you could have that buyer agency go past one transaction. You can extend the buyer agency. So a lot of times you'll be working with somebody to 6 months to a year. You go to rewrite the other contract and you are actually out of buyer agency. You might need to rewrite it. So you have to keep those dates in mind too. And it can be canceled, but it only can be canceled, just like the listing, by both parties. So the parties are actually your broker and the buyer, not you and the buyer. So if you want to bail on your customer with the buyer agency, we actually have to follow through with it if the customer wants you, and it wants the brokerage too. So there's not an easy way to cancel it. Did you have something to say, Glenn?
Client,
Sorry. See, good correction. But if the client wants to cancel it and become a customer, they have to be with us that they cancel it. Of course, we would let anybody out of it because, again, this is my next one, is enforcement. To enforce the buyer agency, we are absolutely going to have to take somebody to litigation. We certainly can say, hey, you signed this buyer agency and then you went and bought this for sale by owner without using Glenn as your agent. You owe us $7,000, but I can guarantee you they are probably going to get an attorney, and so will we. So we have to see how much that is going to cost us and yourself in business. So let's go through the buyer agency. Let me go to my shared screen here. And I'm actually in my my dot loop. And so I'm going to just start right with that. I'm going to add the loop. I'm going to, instead of property address or MLS, since I'm working with a buyer right now and I don't have an address, I am going to put their name in here, and I am going to put Betty buyer. All right. And then I'm going to hit continue. Then I can go to load template and I say residential buyer. Continue again. I can upload a photo that I take off of Facebook if I want to. I'm not sure if that's creepy or not. You decide. And then I'm just going to the status pre-offer. And this doesn't have a price, so I'm just going to go in and view the loop. The first thing that I am going to do is actually go to view details, and I'm going to add a person. The other way that you can add a person is to scroll down and add a person here. So I'm going to add Betty buyer at Betty buyer. And because I made this joke today, we will continue it on AOL.com. And her role is, of course, the buyer. And then I can put in all of her other information, which I like to put the telephone in here. And that also helps your broker if you put the telephone when they're ordering title. And then I just add person. I don't send them an intro email because I will be sending them an email about whatever we're doing. You're more than welcome to send them an intro email. Make sure you have that set up. And then add person. All right, so now I'm going to bring up the buyer agency. As you can see, we either have the buyer agency or broker disclosure to customers. A broker disclosure to client you could use. So here is an example of how you would use disclosures. We don't have the broker disclosure client in there because you wouldn't need it on an everyday basis. So if I were to write a buyer agency with my buyer, then that person would be my client. All right. So let's say that I go to a for sale by owner. The for sale by owner is my customer. So if I'm presenting an offer to the for sale by owner, I give him a disclosure to customer to sign so he understands what his rights with me are. But I will give him a disclosure to client so that they know what the rights are with my client, okay? And what is the difference? The difference is negotiation. That's what the difference is. That's the biggest difference. I believe there's 3 different things that are, but negotiation, locating, and I think providing it were the 3 things. But anyway, let's look at the buyer agency and talk about that. And I also want to talk about how you present it. All right, so I'm not gonna read this word for word because you already went through those classes, okay? I am going to talk to you about how you're going to explain this contract to somebody because you've already learned the contract so that you can use it. Now, how do you explain it to people that may have a 5th grade education or may have a law degree in a different form of law? So this is how you're going to do it. You're going to do it in your own words. And, this is just mine over the years. All right. So I'm talking to a buyer and they say, I would like somebody to represent me. Okay. Will you be my agent? And I'll say, sure. Or usually what happens is this is how we approach the subject. When we're looking at a house and says, does this seem overpriced to you? Would you ask for the washer and dryer? Do you think I could ask for a home warranty? I wonder if they would close in March. Those are all negotiations, okay? And this is when you need to decide whether you're going to, they need to decide whether you're going to work for them as a buyer's agent or work for the seller as a seller's agent. And I want to stop 1 second here. And I'm going to show you, I learned something and I'm going to show you it. New share, whiteboard. So this is my what I'm sharing, what I'm teaching you here. So what I'm sharing. This right here, what does this mean? You see this all the time in the MLS. When you take a listing, you have to write it down, right? How much are we paying the person who brings the buyer? If they're a buyer's agent, that's BA. How much are we paying the person who brings the buyer if they're a seller's agent? That's SA. Okay. So knowing this, that might help you move forward when you're listing so that you're able to understand that. So normally if we bring a buyer and we don't have, and we aren't using our buyer agency to get compensated, we're normally going to get 2.4%. Let me go back to share screen to the buyer agency. So in here, the first thing that I do is when I'm talking to someone and they are starting to negotiate, want me to negotiate, then I say, hold on, I need to know if you want me to be your buyer's agent or otherwise right now I'm in pre-agency, but I can work for you or the seller. Either way, as long as we buy a house on the MLS, I will get compensated by the MLS. So to represent you, there's really no cost to you other than if we were to look at a house that wasn't listed in the multiple listing service. And I can explain that to you. Would you like to know more? And then they say, yeah, they would like to know more. Of course, why wouldn't I want you represented, especially you represent me, especially if I don't have to pay for it. All right, so what I let them know is as long as I'm working for you, yes, you ultimately will be responsible for my compensation, but only if we're going to look like at a for sale by owner. And to make sure that the for sale by owner will pay for my compensation so it doesn't end up in your pocket, I would like you to give me the for sale by owner's information before you ever speak to them, because then they will understand that I am bringing you and I will negotiate my commission. Now, in my 20-year career, 2 times that this has happened that got screwed up, and it was the same couple both times, and they went to talk to the for sale by owner before me. Otherwise, for sale by owners have always paid me. So how do we write up the contract and explain it to them? So basically, I'm going to be buying the house with you, okay? It's going to be my responsibility to not only buy the house, negotiate it for you, but to get you the best terms and to get you to find you the best house. So part of your buyer agency is also to locate the property. So let's pretend this buyer agency is for a house on Lake Wausau. They want a house on Lake Wausau. Their price range is $200,000 to $300,000. Okay. Excluded properties is 123 Lake Drive, because they wrote on it in September of 2020. Okay, so that property is excluded for a whole year because they wrote on it with a previous listing. So that's always, or previous agent. So that's something I'd always want to ask. Are there any excluded properties that you may have looked at with another agent? Sorry, that one's down here. This first one would be excluded properties, like they wanted to buy their grandma's property. The other way that you could use this excluded property would be an investor. Okay, so if an investor was buying properties from me, he would not want to have to pay anything if he went and bought it for sale by owner or a bank-owned property privately through the bank. So investors, I usually say just any property that I have showed. But I don't do that for anybody else. Just investors, because they're looking at 5-6 different places where they get their properties, not just through a realtor. So a prior agreement, this is going to be the 123 Lake Street.
Lana,
Yeah.
what if they had previously written on a for sale by owner that didn't go through? Are they still an excluded person? Excluded
For
property?
1 year, according to the contract for 1 year. That's a really good question, but I don't know if the for sale by owner would know that they were. If they wrote on a for sale by owner, and then came back around, yeah, I would think that the for sale by owner didn't. Yeah. I would say that they would be naive to it and they wouldn't know that it was excluded in any way, shape, or form. But the listing contract has it in, and so does the offer, I believe, says that. So, and our question in the hot tips this week was kind of about that, and they said that the contracts decide. So it would just depend on what contracts they used for the for sale by owner. If they didn't use, that's the answer. That's the answer. If they didn't use the residential offer to purchase by the or by the state of Wisconsin, then they might not be protected at all. That's the answer.
Didn't mean to stump you.
No, that's a good one. Thank you. And thanks for being online. It helps. Limited exclusion properties. So if this was excluded for just a short period of time, like, listen, I really want to go look for a house and I really like this house that's listed. I want to go look at it, but I am still thinking about my grandma's cabin over there. So then I could write that down. Anytime I can exclude something for a shorter period of time, I do, because it just makes sense, right? I don't put it out there for the whole contract. So I have a year contract and I exclude grandma's house for a whole year? No. Make a decision. I want a commitment. When we're talking about the lake house from 200,000 to 300,000, this is what I want to get back to. So if they are out there looking for that and one gets listed, and you call up your brother who you do not have a buyer agency with, or you call up your neighbor who you don't have a buyer agency with, and you bring them there and negotiate a contract, then call your client, then you were not working in their best interest. So if they have a buyer agency and they're looking for something specific like this, as soon as you find it, you have to get it to them. You can't just sign a buyer agency and then walk around and not provide them any properties either. So if somebody came to me and said that they wanted to see something, they wanted a property on Lake Wausau under 200,000, I would say, yes, everybody in the world does. I don't need a buyer agency from you for that, okay? Because I wouldn't want to sign one, because then I would be obligated on searching for it for them. All right. So that's another reason why you wouldn't want to use one. The compensation, so I always put 3.5% or MLS stated. And actually, I would love that to be 4%. But most people, I can't say most or anything like that, but consumers, for sale by owners, they have heard from other agents, and a lot of times what they're hearing is between 3 and 3.5%. Okay. And frankly, our office does not want you to do anything under 3%. And here's why. If the MLS will pay you 2.4 and 2.8 to not represent the buyer, then you find a for sale by owner. Why are you only going to take 3 to represent them? Because you know that for sale by owner is going to, even though they don't need representation, they are going to need explanations. So you're going to have to handhold them. What do you think that's worth? To me, that's worth 1% at least, if not more. Remember, I base my commissions on how you're going to treat me and how you're going to react to everything. If every time I tell you something about your house and you react with, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about it, I can guarantee you, you will not get a discount in my commission, because I know you're going to be a handful and I need to be compensated. The other thing is, look at the price, okay? You're dealing with a $100,000 property and you're going to put 2.4 or 3.5 on there. That's not a lot of money. If you're dealing 300,000-400,000, yeah, then we can give a little. But a lot of times, agents, and this was myself too, they want to give to everybody. And this isn't. We are valuable. You understand that this is a legal document that only real estate agents and lawyers can use. Okay. So now one thing I do put is or MLS stated. There are some agents out here that do not put that. So what they do is they charge their people on top of it. So they would take the 2.4% from the MLS and then have the consumer pay that, the client pay them the 1.1%. Now that has to be talked to them up right from the beginning. I don't feel like that is correct to do. I feel like the MLS compensation is adequate enough. And the one thing that some agents do, which my opinion is, I don't like it at all, is they will write an offer. They'll reject the MLS commission and they'll ask for the commission on their buyer agency. And I think that muddies the waters on a lot of the offers, and really doesn't put your buyer ahead of yourself. It actually puts your interest, your commission ahead of the buyer, because everybody else is dealing with it the other way. So that's how I put that there. And I just really wanted to talk about the commission too. You can always use a flat fee for a commission, but check out the flat fee with your brokers ahead of time, so that you know it's adequate enough. Okay. Commission earned, basically they're going to be asking, which is the important part, if the payment can be made by the owner or the owner's agent. So, and that means, can it be made by the for sale by owner? Can it be made by the listing company? Can it also be paid by the seller if they're listed with the other company? So yeah, they agreed to pay RE/MAX 6%, and then you rejected the commission and you wanted the 3.5. So now what we'll have to do is they'll pay the 6% to RE/MAX. Well, they're not going to pay 6% and 3.5. So RE/MAX is going to have to lower their commission to 3.6, give us back the 2.4, give him back the 2.4 so he can pay that plus 1.1. looks pretty greedy that way. So, but you can be paid by the owner, and you can be paid through the other brokerage, and you can be paid through the other, through the seller, through the co-broker agreement. So basically here, I ask what they want to do. So if I have a lot of listings, or my company has a lot of listings, then I have the same firm may represent me and the other party, as long as the same agent is not representing both of us. And then that always keeps it so I'm representing my person. I can use this one that says the same firm may represent me and the other party, but the firm must remain neutral regardless if one or more different agents were involved. So that means that if I go to sell one of Glenn's listings, then I still have to remain neutral. I like this one the best, so that's what I use.
And most people fill that out and they don't realize that they have to be, both parties have to be neutral. So you're really not gaining a lot. You're not
there. You work for a brokerage, so you are never, as long as the same agent is not representing us both. It doesn't have to be. Your buyer agency and your listing contract is with your broker. So what you can do is, if you want to do that, you can just pull one of us in for the negotiating. It doesn't mean like you change any money or anything like that. You just pull in another agent for the negotiating part. That way they have somebody to represent them. Or you can switch them over to the middle one here. So it's really up to you, whatever you decide. The more I'm a listing agent, the more I use the middle one. Otherwise I use the top. I have Glenn always. So it's really up to them to decide, but they kind of are looking for your opinion. This one here is the same firm cannot represent both me and the other party in the same transaction. I reject multiple representation relationships. So that means you can't sell any exit listings to them. Confidential and non-confidential information. So you may know things about what they're looking for, what they, why they're moving, those type of things. We owe confidentiality to everyone, whether they're a customer or a client. We owe them confidentiality. And then, of course, this is for a rental. We do not do the rentals around here. Then you're going to have the delivery of the document. So who is the client that's going to get the delivery of the documents? Who firm? Are they using fax? I don't use mail or commercial delivery ever anymore, but I use email. And as soon as they sign this, they're consenting to the electronic consent and everything. So you can, when they put their email on here, they can use all of that. If for some reason they want to shorten or amend the buyer agency in any way, I would just add a document here, go to templates, all documents, and amendment. Oh, I gotta find it. Amendment to the buyer agency tenant representation. I would put it in there. And it looks like any other amendment, really. And then you just amend the date. Okay, or if something else is going on. Let's say that an investor is looking in Wausau and he says, you know, Alana, my sister lives in Marshfield, and I decided I'm going to look there too, but I'm going to look there with Sue Decker. So I can then amend the contract that says I'm just working for him in the Marathon County properties. So you really can make the buyer agency work to your advantage for everything. So When I started, you either, a lot of people did one party listings, okay? The buyer agency just was not used the way that we use it today. And it was the disclosures just came out, and actually at that time it was, hi, you want to see this house? Can you decide if you want to be my customer or client and sign on the dotted line of whichever one you want to do? On the hood of the car before you go in the house, please, because that's the law. So that was the rule, and it was unobtainable. And so, of course, all of us broke the rules, because how can you do that? You have to develop a rapport with people. So now we have pre-agency, and we have a lot more documents to explain it all. But what I want to point out to you is, if your buyer says, can I go, I drove by a for sale by owner, can we go look at that? And you don't have a buyer agency. Now is the time. They approached you. Now is the time to get the buyer agency signed, okay? To go to the for sale by owner. Now is not the time to knock on the for sale by owner's door and say, can I represent you in selling the house to the people I already have? All right, it makes it messy. So if you're out looking for something for your client and they didn't find it, you found the for sale by owner, then you're more, and you don't have a buyer agency. So it wouldn't be your client, it'd be your customer. You don't have a buyer agency. It's just someone you just started looking with. You drove by and you saw a for sale by owner, and you stopped and called the number. Then you could represent them. But if you already have a buyer agency, don't muddy the waters with getting a one-party listing. It doesn't change a thing, okay? It's about who you're representing. It doesn't change anything, not in Paragon anymore. It used to change your production in Paragon. But memo is about your actual deals, not this side or that side. If you have, in Paragon, you get both sides when you close on a property with a one-party listing or a buyer agency. So if you're representing the buyer, you don't need the one-party listing, but you need to have a contract signed with someone who will pay you a commission before you enter any houses. So if it's a for sale by owner, you cannot go in unless you have a one-party listing or a buyer agency. If it is listed with the MLS, of course you can. Right, Glenn? Make sure we get paid. So I want to tell you, we got about 20 minutes left here. I don't think we're going to use the whole time, but I want to tell you about a really big deal that almost happened, okay? So I was trying to sell a place for a VA hospital here in Wausau, and we're talking $1.5 million deal. So we're talking like increments of $30,000 to $40,000 that people were negotiating. When they called me to help them do this deal, I sent over a buyer agency. I explained it to them, and I asked if they wanted to sign it. Now, these are way professional investors, like way over our head. I didn't even write the contract, okay? They refused to sign the buyer agency. So I'm now working for the seller, not the buyer, even though the buyer sought me out to help him. So when we're negotiating, I'm negotiating with the other agent, and they're not, and my buyer is not communicating as well. And all of a sudden, the other agent came down $30,000, and they came up. Now, who was I working for? I was working for the seller. So I called the other agent and I said, okie dokie, I'm going to ignore that you gave that to me, because they just accepted, or they just countered with a higher number. And I'm not working for them. I'm working for the seller. So I'm working in the seller's best financial interest, not the buyer's. Now, these guys are big wigs and they make a lot of money and they do a lot of things. They lost $30,000. Well, the deal didn't close, so they didn't, but they were going to lose $30,000 because they didn't sign the buyer agency. I want you to think about that next time, what the buyer agency means. And also don't use it to hold people to you, because they're going to fly anyways. And it's best to just let them out of the contract, wish them well, and let them know that you're always there for them if they return. But if you had some sour notes with them, this is what I tell everybody: they were not your people. Move on, okay? Because some people get, they're not worth the money that we make on them, because of the stress levels and the possible litigations that they could cause us.
I have a couple of things.
Okay, good.
So if, first off, if anybody listens to this before next week, Wednesday, is it Thursday? Wednesday?
Wednesday, 3:00.
Wednesday, 3:00. If you watch this before that, I'll give you a $25 gift card. So just gotta let me know that you watched this segment.
All right.
And the other thing is that I wanted to bring up, we had a situation a while back that somebody was acting like they were a buyer's agent and they were not.
Yes. That's the other thing that we do a lot. And that's myself, because that's just where I'm comfortable, is acting as a buyer's agent. Listen, if you are saying, listen, honey, this is what I'm just follow me and I'm going to tell you what to do and it's going to be all fine. And we just got to do it this way. You need to be a buyer's agent. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people out there that are acting like a buyer agent and they are not.
I use the buyer agency all the time, and that is why, because when I started, my friend Larry Johnson, he didn't mix any words and he would tell you like it is. And to do that, you had to represent them. So yeah, that's the other thing. You're right, Glenn. Make sure that you're not acting for a buyer's agent. I had that happen last year. An agent actually, I'm selling a piece of land, and the agent said, well, I did a CMA on it for my buyers and it didn't come in the same amount that you have it listed at. And I said, oh, but you're working for the seller. You can't do a CMA for the buyer. You are working for the seller's best financial interest. So why did you do a CMA? The next time she wrote an offer on that property, she wrote it as a buyer's agent. She was from another company. I liked her. I was not being mean to her. I understood what she was getting at, because she was also trying to escalate the price from where her buyer was. Her buyer was here, we were here, and she was trying to bring it up here, but it was not her job to do that. I can only do a market analysis for a client. So that means for a listing, or if they're going to write on something, I can only give an opinion of price if they have a buyer agency with me.
And I had somebody last year that I wrote an offer for, and they, dictated how they wanted it. So I did not write a buyer agency because they had everything nailed down of exactly what they wanted and tried to do. And it was a whole big mess that they could have avoided if they would have listened, but they went off on their own. So we got the deal done, but seller's agent.
Yep. And that's okay. That is absolutely okay to be a seller's agent. There's no problem with that. But if you do have the buyer agency, you better be you always should be recommending inspections and well and septic and all of that. But if you have a buyer agency, you better really be recommending it, because it is the right thing for them and in their best interest. Glenn and I had a buyer agent. We only lost out on one big buyer agency, and that was they We had it with the wrong person, didn't we, Glenn?
Which one was that?
We had the buyer agency with, well, it just kind of, it was like the VA one we had.
Okay.
It with the people they were, I mean, it was with the right people, but we kept showing the house to their parents, and their parents couldn't get a hold of us one weekend, so they just called somebody else. And so we were at the other company at the time, and we requested our broker to try to get that money. Well, when somebody is trying to buy a house with VA, they have 3 kids, they don't have another, this was 200,000. So they don't have another $6,000 to give you. And honestly, we would have had to sue for it, and you have to make decisions. So you have to weigh that out. And at the time, our broker did not want to do that for that client. And, you know, I fully support that decision, though I might have for that client because they were over in Antigo and they were from out of state. So it's not like they had a bunch of things, but anyways, that's neither here nor there, but it always has to be litigation. So those people didn't do it in malice at all, and most people do not break contracts in malice. If anybody ever asks you to see their buyer agency, first of all, that is not another broker cannot ask you to see your buyer agency, and you should never send it to the other brokerage or the lender. They don't need it either. And sometimes lenders get confused by it because they hardly ever see it. But if your client asks you to see your listing contract or your buyer agency, that, oh, I'm going to get my llama flag. We'll call it, that's a red flag. So when your client asks to see the paperwork, that means they're not happy with you. They're doubting something and they want to read the paperwork on how to get out of it. So when they say that, then I always just, usually they're texting it or email, I always pick it up and say, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? What's going on? Can I talk to you? You know, you need to talk to me. What's happening? So that's our power hour here on buyer agency. I hope that you learned something, anything. And I hope you get a $25 gift card from Glenn. And I want to know where he hides all these.
What was that?
Where do you hide all these gift cards? I can't.
Wouldn't you like to know?
I think it's your truck. All right. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks for joining.